Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers on Fox 54, sponsored by Realtree. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
And let there be football. Welcome into the show as always. I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. And on today's show, I'm going to give you my final thoughts. The first true week of college football, the first true weekend, is kicking off shortly. So I just want to talk about some Georgia stuff. I want to talk about some Clemson things and how that matchup is really going to benefit both teams in my estimation. I want to talk to you about why Notre Dame has no excuses this year. And I also want to talk to you about a coach that a lot of people should be applying the heat they're applying to Ryan Day to this guy. Now, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you're going to apply the heat to Ryan Day, I think there's a coach that's more deserving. And in second down, the NFL is upon us as well. Chiefs, Ravens. I love the fact that they're both in the AFC, and I'm going to tell you why. And then you're looking at the Eagles and the Green Bay Packers, I think two teams that will be vying for an NFC championship. And then my nonsense narratives, recruiting has always been the lifeblood of college football. But I think people think recruiting at a high level always masks things that go on in the program, and I'm going to tell you why I just think that's a nonsense narrative. And then the final drive, there's a quarterback in the SEC that I think is NFL ready and may have a phenomenal NFL career. All that and more right here on Move the Chains. But you know how we do it. Let's kick it off with first down. All right, so what are my final thoughts? You know, I haven't given you any rankings yet when it comes to teams. Why? Because I don't have any data yet in my estimation. I'm not real big on the preseason rankings. I know people love them. I'm not knocking them. That's just not who I am. So you will get a debut of the Rivers rankings later on in the season. Just want to give you a little tease on that. But just want to give you some final thoughts before the full slate of games kick off in a few hours here when it comes to college football. So first, let's talk about Georgia versus Clemson. I think both teams will benefit from this matchup. And you can be asking me, well, how do you think both teams will benefit? One's got to win and one's got to lose. Absolutely, but if you look at Clemson, Clemson is a football team that is going to be experienced, and they're going to get tested early on in week one. And if you're in Dabo Sweeney, if you're in the expanded college football playoff, and if you're in a situation to where you may be vying for an ACC title, this is the type of game you want, because unlike a Florida State, who I'll talk about in a little bit, this isn't a conference game for the Clemson Tigers. This is an opportunity to get an early opportunity to see where you stand in the landscape of top-tier programs. Georgia is a team that we know is going to benefit because they're going to be running the gauntlet through the SEC. They're presumably going to have one of the toughest schedules. Again, we'll see how that plays out as the season unfolds. But this is a team that's bringing back a guy in Carson Beck, who's bringing back guys like Malachi Starks, who's bringing in guys in transfers that are going to continue to elevate this program for what it already is, having won 2 national championships in the past 3 seasons. No matter who wins or loses, both teams will benefit from this game, if by nothing else, playing top-tier talent and preparing them for their season moving forward. All right, let's go to my next final thought here. There are no excuses for Notre Dame in 2024. Now, I'm a Marcus Freeman kind of guy. Like, I love Marcus Freeman because I love defensive-minded head coaches. I'm just being honest with you. I'm a defensive coach. That's what I love. But Notre Dame has been a program that's been in the college football playoff before. Let's not forget they hadn't been there. But in their previous 2 showings, they didn't show very well. I'm not sitting here saying anything about Marcus Freeman, that he's not a good coach, that he can't get the job done. I'm just saying there are no excuses for Notre Dame, because Notre Dame a lot of times is hampered by their academic prowess. That's just the truth of the matter when it comes to recruiting. But now you expand the college football playoff and you're able to dip into the transfer portal. I like a guy like Riley Leonard, former quarterback at Duke, to come in and run this program like they did when they went and got a Sam Hartman from the ACC to run the program before Riley Leonard. Notre Dame is going to be one of the best defensive teams in the country. I know a lot of people don't like to talk about that. It's not the sexy word. People don't really love defense, but it wins championships. I'm telling you, on any level. And Notre Dame, along with a strong offensive line, along with a strong defensive front, is going to be a team that can vie for a national championship, and they're one of the teams that truly benefit from an expanded college football playoff. So when they were being punished by their own opportunities, right, of their own volition, they're independent. Don't feel sorry for Notre Dame. So they got squeezed with a 14 playoff, because if you're looking at conference champions, they weren't in that situation, and that's their own fault. But when you expand it, now being independent is not a bad thing. Plus, they get to play teams from the Big Ten, from the SEC, from the ACC. So most teams don't even get the opportunity to play a variety of conferences and get a variety of good wins. Notre Dame does. I think they'll be a good team, and I think you'll see them fighting for a 12-team playoff spot as an as-large team and trying to win a national championship this year under Marcus Freeman. All right, my next thought here. I'm glad this graphic came up first. Florida State has their wake-up call. Do you remember last weekend when I told you that I don't think Florida State will have a 2023 hangover? I still don't. I don't think this is indicative of a hangover. I think this is indicative of a team full of transfers who didn't gel in week one. And if you look at the rushing stats, 190 yards. Now, we know Georgia Tech is a team that's predicated on running the football. Let me rephrase that. They're a program predicated on running the football. No matter who the coach is, it's what they do. So not only was Florida State not able to get pressure on the quarterback of Georgia Tech, they weren't able to stop the run, which allowed Georgia Tech to control the clock and time of possession. So that's why Florida State was in the position that they were in. But again, all these people that are saying Florida State are out of it and that they don't have a prayer to reach the college football playoff, just pump your brakes. I told you, don't overreact to anything that happens in week 0 or week 1. All right, now, as I move forward to Lincoln Riley here, why do I want to talk about Lincoln Riley? Because I talked about last week Ryan Day, and a lot of people saying he's on the hot seat. And I told you I think that's ridiculous considering what Ryan Day has accomplished. So I'm asking you, if you think Ryan Day is on the hot seat, why isn't Lincoln Riley getting that same smoke? Lincoln Riley is a phenomenal offensive coordinator. Lincoln Riley is a phenomenal offensive mind. I've told you this before. I don't necessarily think great offensive minds only or defensive minds only make great head coaches. I'm not saying Lincoln Riley hasn't been somewhat successful. He got to the college football playoff at Oklahoma. But when it comes to USC, he's 19-8 in 2 seasons. And last year, look what they had with a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Caleb Williams. He turned the ball over because they were so bad defensively. He was making bad decision after bad decision, trying to win every game on his arm and with his legs. So if you're Lincoln Riley and USC, you're heading into the Big Ten, and I've talked about this before. You have to try to be balanced in some way. I'm not saying you have to run the ball 50% of the time and throw it 50% of the time, but you have to be a team that is not predictable. And we understand that Lincoln Riley is going to come in and have a highly loaded offense, but in the Big Ten, if you don't play defense, it's going to cost you like it did in the Pac-12 and like it's done for his career. So if you're going to criticize and lambaste Ryan Day and say he shouldn't be where he is, there's no reason that Lincoln Riley shouldn't be getting that same smoke in my estimation. All right, that's it for First Down. When we come back from the break, NFL preview is here. We'll be back when we move the chains right after this. Welcome back in to Move the Chains. Hey, before we get to second down, I want to take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for being able to move the chains. I love it. It's phenomenal. It's my brainchild. So I think it's an opportunity to bless a lot of people with football, with what you love. And I also want to thank you, the fans. You're the reason this is able to happen. You keep watching on Fox and also on YouTube. So greatly appreciate you. And of course, last but not least, none of this is possible without the best production crew in the business. You need people behind the scenes who are really making it happen, and that's exactly what I have. So shout out to the best production crew in the business right here on Move the Chains. All right, it's time to hit it. Let's go to second down. Man, the NFL is so phenomenal right now, and I'm so excited that the season is kicking off this Thursday, and then you've got a game Friday as well before we even hit the weekend. And I want to start by talking about the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. Everybody knows this is a rematch of the AFC title game last year where Kansas City was able to win and go on to win their second straight Super Bowl and their third in the last 5 seasons. But I want to talk about 82% when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens, and then 77% for the Chiefs. 82% of the Ravens' projected starters were drafted by Baltimore. Do you understand that this is a franchise that knows how to win? And they've got a quarterback that's won back-to-back, not back-to-back, but won 2 MVPs before the age of 30. Like, Lamar Jackson's still one of the youngest quarterbacks in the NFL. And a lot of people are looking at what they didn't do against Kansas City. And I'm going to ask you, who did beat Kansas City last year? So I can look at this as a progression. Lamar Jackson had his team in the AFC Championship game, and while there were things that could have been done differently, coming into this game, we understand this game means 1 win and 1 loss for either team. It won't determine who wins the AFC at this point in time. It could have a long way and a lot of things to say about who has the number 1 seed in the AFC moving forward, but this is a team that's a well-oiled machine, and when you bring in somebody like Derrick Henry, typically defenses down in the NFL will say, you know what, it only matters what you do inside the 20, so we'll let you get to the 20. We don't matter how many yards. It doesn't matter how many yards you get from the 20 to the 20. But if you let Baltimore in the red zone, they're going to be a problem with the way that Lamar Jackson can run the football, Mark Andrews being a red zone threat, and then having a finisher in Derrick Henry. Oh, and by the way, now they've got guys like Nelson Aguilar and Zay Flowers who can get you to the 20 because they're a big play offense. This is a team that was the number 1 ranked scoring defense last year. That means something. They're balanced, they're hungry, and they understand what's at stake. And I think this is a great barometer moving into the season, having to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And speaking of the Chiefs, 77% of their projected starters on offense or defense were drafted by Kansas City. And I already told you, this is a team that was able to flip their identity, seem mid-season, and still win a Super Bowl when a lot of teams will not only not win a Super Bowl, but likely not even make the playoffs when they go and change the way that the Chiefs did. And I think this is just indicative of how this team works together. And I've been on record about saying this before. I want to give Andy Reid a lot of credit because there have been a lot of times that I think Andy Reid has put this team in position to not win football games because they're so talented. Sometimes they like to play with their food, so to speak. But this was a team that last year became one of the most disciplined teams in the NFL, and they were the number 2 scoring defense. So when you're looking at teams coming into the start of the season, what better way to kick off the NFL season than with the Chiefs and the Ravens as a rematch of the AFC title game, and it's 2 teams that I see for the foreseeable future being 2 of the best teams in the NFL. So from the AFC to the NFC, I don't want you to forget about the Eagles and the Packers. And I've told you, a lot of people have sold stock on the Eagles. I'm not doing that. The Philadelphia Eagles will resemble, in my estimation, what they looked like 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. Defensively, they've gotten better. And if you watch this team and you watch the swoon that they hit towards the end of last season, a lot of it was self-imposed because a lot of it was being out of position on the defensive side of the football. Poor gap control. Didn't know what to do with their assignments. And that comes again with the new coordinators. Now, they have new coordinators coming again this year, but you've got experience in Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore. And I think Jalen Hurts will be an MVP candidate this year. I'm not saying he'll win the MVP, but because he's a dual-threat quarterback, because they will have a solidified running game in my estimation, and because you got guys like Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, he has a litany of weapons, not to mention Dallas Goedert. The Philadelphia Eagles are a team that I consider the top in the NFC East, and I think they will be a contender to try to go to an NFC championship along with the 49ers and possibly along with the Detroit Lions. Now, the Green Bay Packers, a lot of people wrong because of the way they finished last year. And I can't say enough, Brian Gutekunst, the general manager, I can't say enough about what he did in drafting Jordan Love. I feel the same way about the Packers that I did about the Falcons drafting Michael Penix Jr. because they had a quarterback in place in Aaron Rodgers. They had an MVP in place. And remember, Aaron Rodgers went on to win 2 more MVPs with Jordan Love on the bench. Isn't that what you wanted? If that's what spurred Aaron Rodgers to win 2 more MVPs and get you to another conference championship game that they lost to the Bucs, isn't that what you wanted? Wouldn't you want that as an organization? And the Packers haven't missed a beat. The last year with Aaron Rodgers, they missed the playoffs, and the first year with Jordan Love, they made the playoffs. And I'm telling you, this team can mimic the Kansas City Chiefs from this standpoint. Go and look at what Green Bay has done through the draft, especially defensively. Go and look at what they've done. A lot of people are going to focus on Jordan Love and those receivers, which is fine. I have no problem with it. They're growing together, and they're going to look good, I believe. But the defensive side of the football is where this team can make their hay and really do damage in the NFC as a true contender to try to get to a Super Bowl. All right, that's my NFL preview for second down. When we come back, it's my nonsense narrative. We'll be back and we'll move the chains right after this. And we'll go back into the show, man. Just a lot of jam-packed NFL and college football here on the show today, and that's what it's going to look like during the season. So I just want to prepare you for Move the Chains during football season. Man, I can't wait. Just got me like I'm ready to run through a wall. Time for my favorite segment of the show, Nonsense Narrative. Let's go. Man, you'll hear me say recruiting is the lifeblood of college football 100 times a day, 100 times a show. I say it because it's the truth. But one thing I want to make sure people understand is that just because you recruit at a high level doesn't mean that you can sustain a lot of injuries and or suspensions and nothing changes. I'm somebody who's a proponent of the next man up mentality. But there's a reason that the mentality exists, because the next man up is not the man at that certain position. And you look at a team like a Texas and a Georgia. I wanted to talk to you about these programs because Georgia is about to kick off against Clemson. And we don't know what it's looking like for Georgia, right? We don't know if Trevor Etienne's going to be able to play, right? We don't know if Roger Robinson's going to be able to play. We don't know what's going on with Small Munden, whether it's suspension or injuries. And I've talked about this with Texas, C.J. Baxter, Christian Clark. They're out for the season. Those are 2 of their top running backs. So undoubtedly, the way that they recruit helps mask these things. Because if you recruit at a high level, generally that means that you have a lot of depth on your team. And you have players that can start at other Power 5 programs that are second and third teamers. But remember, it's also about reps. It's also about repetitions. Just because you recruit at a high level doesn't mean that you want to sustain injuries. I'm going to go back to this. Do you remember Georgia in the SEC title game against Alabama last year? Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, two of the best players in the SEC and all of college football, both are in the NFL right now. Both played in the game. Neither were 100%, and you could see it on the field. You could see the limitations of their two-star players offensively. And I think it mattered in the landscape of how that game ended up. Alabama was more physical, they were better up front, and they were also healthier. So don't think health doesn't matter. Being healthy a lot of times has to do with luck, but it also has to do with skill when it comes to your strength and conditioning program, which is a huge find when it comes to college football. So recruiting matters. You do it so you can have as many top-tier athletes on your program and on your roster as possible. But please don't think for a second that when you suffer suspensions to big-time players and when big-time players go down, even when they have an opportunity to get reps as second and third teamers, that there's not going to be a difference. Because if the second and third teamers were as good as the first and the starters, they'd be on the field. All right, so that's my nonsense narrative for the week. When we come back for the show, it'll be the final drive, and I'll tell you why there's a certain quarterback I think is really NFL ready. We'll be back when we move the chains right after this. Welcome back into the show. You know what that means. We're about to end it, so it's time for the final drive. Man, Carson Beck is NFL ready. I mean, you can look at the measurables, you can look at the arm talent, you can look at the versatility that he has in terms of being able to move the pocket, but the guy is NFL ready. And I want to tell you this. He may end up not winning a national championship at Georgia. We understand that they just lost one game last year and were dominant in the bowl game. And I think they're a favorite to win a national championship this year, but you never know what happens. But that still won't mean that he's not NFL ready. And I love how that goes because Stetson Bennett won back-to-back, and he's not going to be the NFL quarterback that Carson Beck is. And I think a lot of that has to go to being in the program that he's in, being coached by the coaches he's being coached by. He is really being prepared to ball out at the next level. And I think you'll see Carson Beck as a top 5 pick when the NFL draft rolls around. All right, you know what that means, man. Listen, you can not only catch Move the Change right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but also on YouTube. The channel is at @move_the_change. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, because it's always greatly appreciated. Hey, go ahead and get ready to watch some football, man. For the best production crew in the business, I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. And until next time right here on Move the Chains, God bless.